Greetings and salutations, future diplomats. Here are again for another exercise list. Today we will go over our fourth exercise list. And in this list, I have decided to add a text about nuclear proliferation and deterrence, which is a topic which is very up to date, and it's a topic that's discussed very much in your international politics courses. And I thought it had a lot to do with where the mindset for the exam is right now, and also being that it's a article from the publication The Guardian, the newspaper from England, or from the United Kingdom, that often, frequently, almost every year, there's some text either in the first phase or in the second phase from The Guardian, from this publication. So it's a publication that the examining board likes a lot. So I thought it would be very useful for me to give to you guys a text, an article from the Guardian, so you can get used to the language, and it also has to do a lot with a topic that is very up to date in international relations. Okay, and a topic's near and dear to the foreign ministry, which of course is nuclear non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament. Okay. All right, it's a pretty straightforward text. There are a few harder vocab words here and there, but nothing too difficult. It's right in line with what they ask you in the exam. It's, of course, the style and the length of text that they usually ask in the exam. And this one is a bit shorter than last week's. Last week's was unusually long, but it was easier. But this one is right about where the longer texts of the first phase of the true and false exam would be, like around 500 words, and the other smaller texts would be around 200 words. So nothing too big, and considering that now we only have 9 questions, it's very doable, as they say. It's better than before. You shouldn't be as rushed as past years to do these questions, okay? So let's get to it. Let me just share my screen with you guys. All right, so here we go. As always, here you have my email address. If you have any questions, any doubts about the course or anything, please feel free to send me an email. Here, I will answer you directly, okay? All right, so carrying on. This is the text that we have for today. It's a text about nuclear deterrence, more specifically, and it's a, I would say it's a different view of what we have on deterrence. It says that deterrence itself is not too efficient, and more than that, deterrence itself, nuclear deterrence, is difficult to prove its efficiency, given that the last atomic weapon was used in 1945. So we can't say for sure, according to the text, if it was deterrence, the Institute of Deterrence, which is used as an excuse by the nuclear power nations, as an excuse for them to have nuclear weapons, is this deterrent excuse that by having nuclear weapons, they're actually preventing a future world war, because the idea of using a nuclear weapon would be so extreme because it would cause such devastation that people would not be inclined to use it or even to threaten the use of it. So it would result in a mutual assured destruction if both sides use a nuclear weapon. In the case, especially during the Cold War, when, of course, the United States always had a larger arsenal than the Soviet arsenal, but both arsenals were huge and could destroy the world many times. So It's a situation which they call, of course, you know, mutual assured destruction, or MAD, and that deterrence, uh, 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 that nuclear deterrent was key in promoting peace for the last 50 years, now 70 almost. Well, and then this text says that it's not necessarily deterrence that stops countries from using nuclear weapons, but the only way to be sure is not to have nuclear weapons at all, which goes right in line with what the Brazilian Foreign Ministry says, its position and its promotion of nuclear disarmament, complete and total nuclear disarmament for every country, as the recent nuclear ban treaty, which was heavily promoted by Brazil, uh, also 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 promotes. Okay, all right, all right. So let's get down to the questions. As I always tell you before we start, always go to the footnote and look at the name of the article and the name of the author and where it's from. You can get a lot of information from there. Here from this title already of this article, you will see a thesis already. So a lot of points, a lot of reading interpretation questions could be solved just by reading the title of the article. And it's always snuck away down there. They don't put usually in the first phase, they usually do not put the title of the article that of where the text comes from on top. I think that might be, I think that's even it's even planned. They want to make you look for it, and they don't want to make it too obvious. So always go to the footnote. They always put the title in the footnote. So always go to the footnote first and see who wrote it, what's the title, where is it from. From there, you can get a lot of information from the get-go of the text, a lot of reading comprehension information from there, just from the title and from where it's from, okay? And also from the author. Okay? All right, question 1, let's go. According to the text, decide whether the following statements are right or wrong. So according to the text, this is a reading comprehension question mostly. Of course, sometimes you can sneak in a vocab question there, not too directly, but usually when it's a phrase like this, it's a reading comprehension question. It's almost like a little summaries of a few arguments in the text. So usually they're going to be scattered out textually there. All right, in the actual text. So you can look for it. Okay, item number 1 here. Nuclear deterrence only becomes a feasible security strategy when only a small group of powerful nations acquires them. And this one is incorrect. Just pay close attention to words like only, superlatives like the best, or the most, the least, the greater. These kind of comparisons, as I told you in the first classes, usually they should ring a bell. They should sound an alarm there in your head that something is not quite right there. Here, the text does not say that nuclear deterrence only becomes a feasible security strategy when only a small group of powerful nations acquires them. No, that's not the case. The text actually says the opposite. Not quite the opposite, but it says that no country, can have nuclear weapons if you want to guarantee peace. Peace is only guaranteed if these weapons do not exist. It says, it's textually here, right at the end. The only way to make sure that nuclear weapons are not used is to make sure that there are no such weapons. So here you are clearly at the end, and I did this on purpose. I put a Because sometimes people think that they do the questions in order of the text, and sometimes they're not. So sometimes the first item might be relating to something at the end of the text or in the middle, not necessarily at the beginning. So that's why I would recommend, if you have time, of course, to read the whole text before you start doing any questions, because it might make it a lot easier for you to answer the questions. You don't have to go back and forth in the text if you do that. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't. So I would suggest you guys read first the text and then go to the questions, because they're always they're always out of order. They're not necessarily in order. So pay attention to that. Right. Item number 2. Deterrence has been promoted by important political figures given its proven track record of success in the latter half of the 20th century. Okay. And this is incorrect also. I wanted to confuse you guys with Churchill, because Churchill defended deterrence. But of course, it's he only talks about Churchill here, and specifically only Churchill. Yeah. In junkyard. There we go. Winston Churchill described it in 1955 with characteristic vigor. Safety will be the sturdy child of terror, and survival the twin brother of annihilation. Quite poetic, actually. But here in the text, it does not necessarily say, it's extrapolating what is in the text. It doesn't say that deterrence, it's making two assumptions here, that important political figures, it doesn't pinpoint how many. One, they support deterrence, nuclear deterrence in this case, and two, they support it because of its track record of success. And that's not the case. And the text implies as well that they support deterrence only to use it as an excuse to have nuclear weapons, to have that strategic edge on other countries, and not necessarily to promote peace, not because of the success of nuclear deterrence. But they might want the text, it alludes to that political figures, especially of course in nuclear countries, use deterrence more as an excuse than rather promote it because of its success. There's no causal relationship there. And also, the only political figure that was stated there was Churchill, and Churchill did not live through most of the latter half of the 20th century. So he could not have known of the track record of success that deterrence, the nuclear deterrence had. Okay, so 2 things there. 3, item number 3. Proponents of nuclear deterrence present a flimsy argument to support their claim. Okay. And this was more of a vocab question, and if you didn't know what flimsy meant, it would be a lot tougher to understand, to solve this question here, number 3, which is of course right. Flimsy can mean inconsistent, can mean weak, can mean an argument that has no substance. And in this case, the author does state that usually the arguments for deterrence are very superficial. Their only argument is that deterrence, if you look at the last 70 years, there hasn't been any war, any major full-scale war between the superpowers, and also no nuclear weapons has been used since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But that's they cannot provide empirical evidence that is because this happened, this peaceful period relatively happened because of deterrence. It's like saying, like he uses there in an example of a woman spraying a scent in her lawn to keep away elephants, and no elephants show up, and she says it works because no elephants showed up, but at the same time there are no elephants where she lives, so no elephants would ever show up. It wasn't because of the thing that she was spraying on the lawn. It was because there were no elephants there. So there could be other causes that these arguments do not cover. So these arguments are very weak, very superficial, flimsy. There's no depth, no conceptual depth to them, according to the author of the text. Okay. 4. Churchill contends that the nuclear age has profoundly altered the conditions for international peace and security. Okay. That can be gathered from the text. That is okay. Given that these types of weapons guarantee survival through annihilation, then the second part is incorrect. First part, okay, you can kind of you get that impression from reading from the text that yes, there were deep alterations in the international peace and security system that the nuclear age caused, of course, and completely changed military strategy, especially for going into large-scale wars. But this is not what Churchill said. Of course, I tried to use the same words as Churchill did just to confuse you guys, but it's not what he said. Let's go back here to what Churchill said. Safety will be the sturdy child, the strong child of terror, and survival, the twin brother of annihilation. Okay. So this would mean, what he wants to mean here is that for the first time, our survival depends on the use and also of the non-use of the weapon, nuclear. Because at the same time, having nuclear weapons guarantees your survival because it deters other people from using it. Because if they use it, they will annihilate themselves and also you. So this is the two faces of nuclear deterrence. At the same time, it guarantees your survival because if used, it causes annihilation. It's not because it's not through annihilation, but it's because it might cause annihilation. That fear deters people from using nuclear weapons. If this were true, it would mean your survival depended on annihilation, which is it's a complete oxymoron. Okay, how can survival depend on annihilation? In this case, I mean through annihilation. Okay. So recapping question number 1. 1 is incorrect. 2 is incorrect. 3 correct. And 4 incorrect. Okay, now question number 2. Based on text 1, decide whether the following statements are right or wrong. It is reasonable to assume that nuclear deterrence was a major factor in preventing World War III. Again, I tried to use in this case, I tried to use very tame language, very moderate language, like using the word reasonable, just to throw off the candidate here. But if you read it, it's almost the same idea. Well, it's the inverted idea of number 3 here, number 3. In this case, he says that there is no empirical evidence that nuclear deterrence was a major factor in preventing World War III. It might be the elephant case of the woman spraying it. It might be something else that prevented World War III, not necessarily deterrence. They're using the fact that nothing happened to to justify nuclear deterrence and using nuclear deterrence to justify having nuclear weapons. So it might be a justification that is not based on fact, reality. So this is the whole idea of the article, is he's trying to dispel this myth of deterrence, that deterrence prevented World War III, is preventing so far World War III. Okay. And the only way to prevent it here in number 2 is a nuclear-free world, is what the author says right at the end, that a nuclear-free world is the only sure way to world peace. There's the wrong answer. I almost fooled myself here. This one is incorrect as well, because he doesn't say world peace is too broad. Sometimes when they make these very generic endings, it's 90% of the time incorrect. Because here they want to make sure that you are paying attention to the article of what it said textually. And what he says is not that a nuclear-free world is a sure way to world peace. Of course, you can infer that later on, but what he says specifically is that a nuclear-free world is the only sure way that we have that nuclear weapons will not be used. It doesn't say world peace. There could be other wars, other kind of regular wars, regular warfare, but the only way to make sure that nuclear weapons won't be used is to have a nuclear-free world. But he doesn't say that necessarily without nuclear weapons you have world peace. For many years, many millennia before nuclear weapons, there were always wars. We didn't need nuclear weapons to have wars. Okay, so this one is also incorrect. Question 2, item number 3. The phrase a jewel brilliant and hard, at once twinkling and trembling, could be changed to a jewel brilliant and hard, at once gleaming and wobbling, without changing its meaning. And this one is a straight up vocab question, and they can be interchanged. They're synonymous. The word twinkling, like a twinkling star, a shining star, is the same thing as gleaming. Gleaming also means shiny, twinkly, the same. And wobbly, almost like trembling, they're synonymous, means that you're shaking, you're trembling, you have quivers, and you're shivering. It's the same idea. So here you just interchange the synonyms. This was a straight up vocab question. These ones are harder to study because you have to basically memorize a dictionary. But through reading English a lot and listening to a lot of dialogue in English and reading a lot of English, you can almost by osmosis, you can absorb the meaning of these words. Of course, there's always going to be a word that you're not going to know. And as I told you, you guys before, leave blank. Do not guess on vocab questions which you have no idea what the word means. And also, even if you have a little bit of an idea but you're not sure, leave it blank. Leave vocab questions blank. Okay? And number 4, the only way to make sure that nuclear weapons will not be used is to not have them at all. And here, you see the word only, look at the word only, then alarm bell should ring. You should see now, read it carefully. But this one is correct, because this one is exactly what the author says. This is exactly his thesis. Is the only way to make sure that nuclear weapons will not be used is to not have them at all. It's a simple thesis, of course, and it's a way to demystify deterrence and to delegitimize deterrence also, as well, and promote nuclear disarmament, which is interesting for us. Okay, so recapping here, number 1 is wrong. Number 2 is also wrong. Number 3 is right. And number 4 is wrong. And number 3, this is a vocab question that they used to do it a lot in the exams way back from 2009 to 2010. Those exams, they used to love to have these vocab questions. This word can be replaced by that word. And they started doing this again. Now, last year they did it again. And it's something that, again, you should leave blank if you have no idea. But these ones are even worse because if you have no idea what the original word meant, then you're going to miss out on a whole point here because you never guess in these questions. You might get it completely wrong. Okay. So the word bamboozled, it's here in bold typing. The public has been bamboozled by the shiny surface appearance of deterrence. You can get it from context as well if you analyze it. The word bamboozle has also the meaning of being tricked to something. All right. In this one, I gave you 4 different synonyms of bamboozle, so you can actually learn and memorize them as well, because this is a word you can use in the second phase as well, bamboozled. And here's some synonyms that you can also use. So all of them are correct. The word befuddled, the word duped, the word hoodwinked, and the word swindled. All of them means you were tricked in some way. So the public was tricked into thinking that deterrence was efficient and very good for world peace. And actually, it's not. It has no proven track record at all. That's what he's saying. He's not saying that it's bad either. He's saying that there's no proven track record of nuclear deterrence. Okay? So these are 4 words that are good to memorize. So you can use it in a composition, maybe in a translation, to widen your vocabulary. Okay. Here in text number 2, this text is from the 2009 exam. That's a while ago already, almost 10 years. But it was an interesting text talking about a historical figure. Sometimes they like to do this, and that's why this text inspired me to do the Machiavelli text. And they have been known to do this, the examining board, or a text about a specific historical figure. And so it's a good idea to go back and look at the vocab that they use, which is quite similar to the text I gave you guys, the Machiavelli text. Okay. Of course, this text is not very difficult, also short, around 200 words. And the vocab is not too hard. Not too hard. Of course, there are some expressions here. You will see in the item that in the following items that might confuse a little some people, but overall, it's pretty straightforward as well. It's not a literary text. It's more of an academic text. Okay. All right. Item number 1. The aim of describing Luther as weighing in at a hefty 150 kilograms when he died is to suggest a humorous comparison with a heavyweight boxer. No, that is not the. Oh, wait. Just 1 second here. Yeah. All right, so you're going back to question 4, item 1. Yes, the idea here is using the expression weighing in at a hefty 150 kilograms does allude to one of those weigh-ins. The key expression here is weigh-in at boxing matches, right before or a week before, I don't know how long before, a boxing match. The two fighters go to a weigh-in, official weigh-in, where they put on scales, they take photos and stuff to get their official weight, depending on, to make sure that they're in the right weight category. So the expression is they go to a weigh-in. So here they were trying to make a comparison with actual boxers at a weigh-in when they're talking about Martin Luther. A hefty means a hefty means a fair amount of weight. So he was very heavy at 150. He was very heavy, full. It was very hefty. And he weighed 150 kilograms. So yes, the idea here was to suggest this comparison with a heavyweight boxer, especially because of the expression weighing in at and hefty. So weighing in means that he was a boxer. It's what boxers do. They go to a weigh-in before the fight. And a hefty means he was heavy. Okay, so there was a comparison here with a boxer, with a heavyweight boxer. And that is correct. Number 2, the phrase churned out 1,800 pages a year suggests that Luther was a careless writer. No. The word here, what it means is that he wrote or he produced 1,800 pages a year means he wrote a lot and fast. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he was careless. He could be a very good writer, also be very careful, but at the same time fast, very efficient. But it says here that he was very efficient. It doesn't say anything about the quality of his writing. So here would be an extrapolation. He was a careless writer. This would mean no. Churned out means that he wrote 1,800 pages a year. Okay. It doesn't say anything about the quality of his writing. So we cannot say if he was a careless or careful writer. It cannot be said. Okay. So this is incorrect. Here, number 3, item number 3, Luther's father indulged in usury. In Portuguese, it would be usura. And this is easily identifiable. Yes, he did indulge in usury because he charged from it here. New evidence suggests that his father owned land and a copper mill besides lending money for interest. Here we go. Lending money for interest is usury. He lent money to receive interest. Okay, he didn't produce anything for that money. He was lending it and collecting the interest. That is usury, okay, which was frowned upon by the Catholic Church, but not so by the Protestant churches at the time. Okay, so this one is correct. The reference to a lightning bolt was meant to allude to a putative divine intervention in Luther's calling. Okay. If we go back here, it was an extraordinary picture. Here we go, a lightning bolt which led them to the 21-year-old's spontaneous declaration he wanted to become a monk. Okay, so this idea of a lightning bolt spontaneously making him want to become a monk gives you that idea of something divine. Something from above came all of a sudden and made him turn into a monk, almost by divine providence. So the idea of a lightning bolt coming from above, yes, conveys that idea of a putative divine being, entity, which intervened in Luther's calling to become a monk, to become a religious, actually. Okay, so this one is correct. So far, recapping question number 4, we have number 1 is right, number 2 is incorrect, Number 3 is correct, and number 4 is correct as well. Okay. Moving on to 5, which also is a vocab question. This one is a vocab and a grammar question. But the grammar here, I think, was just to throw you off, because if you knew the meaning of the word, you would see immediately that only one is correct and the other ones are incorrect. The word digs, as they were referring to here, means archaeological digs, meaning actual digs that they were digging for evidence on Martin Luther. It was an archaeological dig. All right, so it's a noun referring to excavation. It's a synonym of excavation. If a dig, yes, is also an excavation. You're excavating to find artifacts. Okay, so in this case, digs means excavation. So only one is correct. If you go to 2, a noun referring to accommodation, no. A verb referring to mocking, no. There might be some slang. You could say taking a dig at somebody or something, but this is not the case. This is not slang. This is referring to an actual archaeological dig. Okay. You can also say you dig somebody, means that you like somebody. It's also another slang you can use, idiomatic expression. If you dig somebody, especially in the United States, you can say, "Oh, I dig that." You mean you like something. I dig it. Okay, but this is not the case here. Part of an adjectival phrase qualifying sites. No. It's also referring to the dig itself. You see here they were trying to confuse you, putting a lot of grammatical terms before it, and when all you needed to know was the meaning of the word. You didn't need to know it was a noun, a verb, nothing in adjectival phrase or anything. If you knew the meaning and how it was employed there, you would immediately see that it was number 1. Excavation is the only one correct. The other ones are all wrong. So recapping, this is 1 is right, wrong, wrong, and 4 also wrong. Okay, the last item today. All right. So thank you very much. This was one more exercise list we crossed off here. And next week, we will have more exercises and some new surprises, some new surprise questions that I'll ask you. Okay, so thank you very much. Enjoy your week and good studies. See you on the other side. Bye-bye.